Carb wars. We're kind of in a war between that high carb performance camp and the keto low carb camp. And because we've got this bifurcated two ends of the opposite ends of the spectrum warring against each other, today we're going to take a different approach. And we're going to reconsider carbohydrate fueling without ditching the carbs to find that balance of both performance and health. So for this presentation, I did a thing and went to Costco because Costco's America and bigger is better. Just like if a little carbs works well, a whole lot more is going to do better. And I purchased this. Yep, that's what I got. 150 pounds of sugar. And this is the equivalent of sugar that you're going to consume in the 6 months leading up to an Ironman or a 100-mile ultra. So you've got to be thinking, that's crazy. It can't be that much sugar. Well, you just do the math. 26 weeks of training, 12 hours a week with an average of 200 extra calories for that training. That's 62,400 calories of carbs. And then you got another 26 weeks or 182 days of an average base calorie intake of 2,000 calories, with 60% of those calories coming from concentrated carbohydrate food sources. Well, it's 182 times 2,000 times 0.6. That's 280,400 calories of carbs. So when you just do the math, that's 280,800 calories divided by 4 calories per gram. So it's 70,200 grams divided by 454 grams per pound. The math says that's 155 pounds of sugar is glucose. So all those carbs equals glucose. It's just the math. Your body sees all that carbohydrate source as sugar. And it's not any better for a half Ironman or a marathon. Yep, that's 125 pounds of sugar in a 6-month period leading up to a marathon. Again, all we have to do is do the math. If we're doing 7 hours per week with 100 calories per hour extra, that's 18,200 calories, quite a bit less than the 200 times 12 hours a week, but still significant nonetheless. And then you got that 182 days, 26 weeks, another 218,400. Do the math again. 130 pounds of sugar. Because once again, your body sees all those carbs as sugar, glucose. So how can this much sugar be a good idea? I don't have to tell you. You know this is not good, but you may not know just how bad it is. So trust what you know intuitively, and let's expand on that. And that's because what you might not fully realize, again, is that all these so-called healthy carbohydrate foods, all these gels that are marketed as complex carbohydrates and natural and blah, 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 it all ends up as this, a mountain of sugar. So the immediate impacts that you're going to see and feel when you start to take in too much sugar on a chronic basis as an athlete are the energy swings resulting in bonking. And of course, when you're taking in all those calories to prevent the bonk, you're going to wind up with GI issues. And because you're burning a lot of sugar and creating a lot of oxidative stress and lactate load, you're going to result in slow recovery because you're creating a lot of cellular damage. Now, these are the things you see and feel, and you're going to address on a first-hand basis. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. What's much more important for you to know and much more serious are the unseen downstream effects of chronically consuming too much sugar. And all of these that I'm going to present are well documented now in the medical literature. It's obvious that sugar is a major driver, and that is cardiovascular disease, diabetes, cancer, and systemic inflammation. Sugar is highly inflammatory, and not only does it help drive these 3 main diseases of cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and cancer, but a whole host of other chronic illnesses like inflammation, arthritis, immune and autoimmune diseases, dementia. So these unseen downstream effects of chronically consuming sugar are there and they're waiting for you. And it's like I say, it's not a question of if you're going to have a problem long term if you keep this up, it's when and what form. And sadly enough, a lot of people consider this as just a normal part of aging. I'm here to tell you it's not normal and it's entirely preventable. So now the question comes up that what if we could significantly reduce all this sugar, say by a third? We'll eliminate 50 pounds of sugar out of that 150 pounds, or half. That's 75 pounds of sugar we can dump. And if you can reduce it by 2/3, which some of our really well adapted hyper responders are doing, they easily do that. That's 100 pounds of sugar they've now taken off the table. And this is entirely possible. And if you're worried about your performance and you feel you need your carbs, this isn't a problem because this is what you have left to play with. If you take out that 50 pounds, you still have 100 pounds of sugar to work with over 6 months. If you take out half, you still have 75 pounds of strategic carbs there to work with. And if you take out 2/3, there's still 50 pounds. That's almost 10 pounds a month of sugar you can use strategically to fuel the performance. This is what we call our strategic carbs. And I want people to look at this and tell me, does all these carbs left to work with look like a keto, a low carb diet to you? I don't think so. Most importantly, what if I told you that most of this comes from within? It comes from you, and it's about empowering yourself to take back your physiology, your native physiology, the one that's meant to burn fat for aerobic metabolism. You have the energy and potential locked inside you, and it's all about unlocking your unique code to get you to be a fat-burning machine, and then using those carbohydrates strategically to give you that performance boost that's not only going to give you a boost in your performance for your competitions, but also give you the adaptive stress to continually build a better version of you, what we call building metabolic capacity on a cellular level. By tapping into that potential of you and that virtually limitless energy supply, you'll never be bonking, you'll eliminate your GI issues, you'll recover like never before because you prevented the damage to recover from. You're going to enjoy robust health, and you're going to have longevity both in sport and in life. Now, how is this done? It's done by moving the needle to optimize your fat metabolism. And I want to show you some data to show that this is possible. And the data corroborates the experience of our athletes. And this red line here is 1 gram a minute. And prior to the FASTER study in 2015, which used athletes I coached and were on the OFM program using Vespa, the science said that the absolute ceiling for fat oxidation was gram a minute, and most athletes burned less than a half a gram. Now, when you go over to 2022 with our pilot data, which surpasses FASTER study data, we're showing that athletes have the potential, because we have athletes doing it, to not only use 1 gram a minute all day long, but be running 1.5 grams, and at high intensity work, even burn over 2 grams a minute, sustain over 2 grams a minute of fat oxidation. This is a complete game changer. So, how do we do this? We do this through disruptive innovation, and that's what Vespa and OFM represent. We've disrupted that paradigm of high carb by changing it to where athletes can burn much more fat, which completely changes that fueling equation. And we've had 23 years, and that 23 years of experience has yielded real world results with athletes winning at the outer edges of human performance, from Olympic gold medals in the marathon, hockey, figure skating, to some of these ultra endurance events like the 100-mile runs, the Moab 240. The last 2 years were both won by Vespa OFM athletes who were both over the age of 50, winning it, to people on the podium and winning stages at the Tour de France, or winning their age groups in various triathlons. So we've got the experience and we've got the knowledge, and we base it all on the science of evolutionary biology to get you back to the native physiology that burns fat as the aerobic energy source and reserves those glucose and glycogen supplies for that fight or flight extra performance you need, and gives you the capacity to burn those matches when you need them in competition.
Now you're probably wondering, what is Vespa? Well, Vespa is a metabolic catalyst to increase your fat metabolism, and it's composed of natural ingredients, including the naturally occurring peptide that we get from the Asian giant hornet, commonly known as the murder hornet. Yes, that's right. And Vespa is low sugar and stimulant free. That's why you don't notice the big burst of energy, no stimulants. And it's so safe and natural, the FDA classifies Vespa as a food-based beverage and not a dietary supplement.
So you're probably curious how this Vespa peptide catalyst works, right? So first I'd like to provide some context and background, because Vespa actually harnesses the science of nature and not the man-made lab. And like a lot of breakthrough discoveries, Vespa is an accidental discovery of nature. And it starts here with the Asian giant wasp, and that Japanese entomologists were studying this wasp and found it flies 60 to 100 kilometers per day. It's the apex predator that kills and masticates its prey into a food ball. And so we're talking high level activity. And then its fuel source is fat. It's the fat stores in its thorax that allows it to be this high level apex predator. And it all happens here in the colony, where the adult takes that food ball back to the colony and exchanges it for the peptide with the larva in a symbiotic relationship called trophaxis. And so it's a symbiotic relationship between the adult and the larva. And this peptide that it's given allows it to access all that fat in the thorax. That's that big back end part of a hornet, a bee, an ant, or a termite that stores fat that allows them to do these super strength, super endurance things. And you'll find that in each pouch, for example, of CV25, there's 100 milligrams of this naturally occurring peptide that is there to also jumpstart your fat metabolism on a cellular level, because these Japanese entomologists hypothesized that because animal cells are remarkably similar across species, this peptide would exert the same influence on a cellular level in other species. So they tested it in rats and mice swimming to exhaustion, saw results, and then, of course, tested it in humans, saw the same results of higher level performance and greater endurance. So the first step is always the hardest, and Vespa actually helps your fat adapted journey, because you can get started without making any changes in your diet, training, or lifestyle, and get a taste of what tapping into your limitless potential is all about. So you start by incorporating Vespa into your training and racing, and in your training, cut your fueling in half as a starting point. And then once you do that, you can adjust your fueling up or down between 30 to 90% more or less of what you previously used, based on the sport, the conditions, and that effort level. Now, by taking that first step to jumpstart your metabolism using Vespa as a tool to tap into your limitless potential without making those extreme or big changes in your diet, training, and lifestyle, you can experience what our athletes experience, and that is the elimination of bonking and GI issues, a recovery you literally have to experience to believe, and start yourself on the road to robust health and longevity. And to a point, these three pictures represent that. On the left is Jeff Browning winning a race, but Jeff Browning in his mid-40s in 2015 was actually considering giving up competitive ultra running because his GI issues had gotten so bad and his recovery was just horrible. Lots of swelling, took weeks to recover, and he's just in rough shape. And 1 month after starting OFM and using Vespa, he won his first race, the Hurt 100. And since then, he's dominated the sport. He's now the second most winning over 100-mile distance athlete ever in ultra running. And even in his 50s, the last 3 years, 50, 51, and 52, he's won a number of races, including last year winning the Moab 240. And he's showing no signs of letting the gas up and continuing to compete at the highest level in the sport. And in the middle is Diane Credenda. And Diane is a 70.3 specialist, and she's now in her 70s and still competing and qualifying for the World Championships. And that's her in 2013 at her first race, the Ironman 70.3 St. George, where she won her age group. And before OFM and Vespa, she would literally will herself across the finish line. Those are the words of her husband, who's an MD and PhD, he's a reproductive endocrinologist. And he would dread going to her races because he said that Diane would come across the finish line. She would drag herself, will herself across the finish line, ashen gray and pale and in a mental fog. And now she's beaming and present, and all of these issues have gone away, and she focuses on competing in her age group and has no signs of giving up. And then on the right there is Roman Bardet, and I believe that's 2016, maybe 15, the year he won a couple of stages at the Tour de France and wound up second on the podium. So the point is, their experience can be your experience by getting started on that journey. Now, I don't want you to take my word for it, but I want you to start looking around and get curious and go to vespapower.com and look at the success stories there. Or you can also go to ofm.io and look at our heroes. And to a point, this next slide is the words of one of our athletes who's just like Jeff and Diane. We've been able to work with him to help him turn his performance and health completely around.
So one thing that was really significant in my training and racing is finding OFM, the OFM lifestyle, and the premier product Vespa, because it changed not only how I raced, but how I trained and how I recovered and how better prepared I was to do the training that's required to do a full Ironman. And the one thing that I did notice with Vespa is not only did it keep me from balking, but the concentration and the way you just feel during a ride, instead of being toward the end of a 50, 60, 80-mile ride, instead of saying, oh Lord, just let me get through this so I can get to the run, you're using the last several miles to strategically plan what you're going to do on the run. And that, knowing that you have the energy to get you through the whole training routine or the race, is what propelled me from a middle of the packer to more recently second in age group at Ironman Chattanooga.
There's always a backstory to this. So let's kind of flesh this out so that we can give it some context and meaning that you can relate to and recognize the importance of what we're talking about all this sugar. So James is a pharmacist and a triathlete, but he's been doing this since 1990, and he was following the conventional science-backed wisdom of a high-carb diet for fueling his sport. But 4 years ago, he was diagnosed with metabolic syndrome and diabetes. And he started looking for alternatives, but because as a pharmacist, he didn't want to go on all those meds. So through OFM and using Vespa, James completely reversed his condition. And not only did it reverse his condition, but his performance went from being a mid-pack age grouper, as he says, to competing for the podium. And this is what he has to say. OFM has not only changed my life, it has saved it. And we've got a podcast up with him, and you want to watch that because we talk a lot about this. And then he wants to tell you guys, as a pharmacist, he wants to keep you off the meds. And there's no better way than OFM. And he's actually proof of that. So because Halloween is approaching, I want to give you a little bit of a Halloween scare in a really healthy way, because just like Halloween, we know all that candy's not good for us. So the next time you see this or this, we want to give you a truly a healthy scare. And to make that conceptual leap to give you that healthy fear that's going to cause you to consider changing what you're doing away from that conventional wisdom of a high carbohydrate diet, you need to always remember metabolically, concentrated forms of carbohydrates are sugar as far as your body's concerned. And once you make that connection and understand that, you can think of all these carbohydrates in this way, that they're just simply a lot of sugar. And like I say, when you do the math, this is what it adds up to in a 6-month period. So whether you're doing a full Ironman, a 100-miler, a half Ironman, or a marathon, or even less, over the course of a year, that is a lot of sugar. But at the same time, we're not saying to take it all out, but just by removing a significant amount, you're going to improve your metabolic health without sacrificing your performance, and you still have plenty of strategic carbs left over to drive that performance, and I would offer improve it. So get that healthy fear and start to make that change. Now, as part of instilling a healthy fear in you to motivate you to change, I want to remind you of what overconsumption of sugar leads to. And as an athlete, it always leads to bonking, and not only bonking, but those energy highs and lows that you experience, not only in sport, but you'll start to experience them in life too. And of course, when you have these bonking issues, you tend to start to consume more sugar, more carbs, and of course, trying to do that while exercising is going to lead to stomach issues, which has a much bigger implication than that immediate thing, which we talk about in our OFM program. And of course, burning too much sugar leads to slow recovery because you're having to recover from the cellular damage you're doing to your body from the oxidative stress and lactate load and glycation that consuming all and burning all this sugar leads to. So these are the immediate problems that you face as an athlete, but I want to also remind you of the much bigger picture because, as I say, it's not a question of if you're going to have a problem, it's when and what form. And these larger problems will loom in the distance as your metabolic capacity gets broken down and your resilience gets broken down over time from the overconsumption of sugar. And it really starts with systemic inflammation, the systemic inflammation that sugar and too much insulin is known for. And this occurs inside on an unseen level in your epithelial cells, in your digestive tract lining, but especially in your cardiovasculature, in your endothelial cells. This is systemic inflammation that is chronic and over time leads to these other issues like cardiovascular disease. Systemic inflammation is known as one of the main drivers. And of course, sugar is also known as one of the main drivers now. That was hidden for a long time. They blamed it on red meat, saturated fat, and cholesterol, but it's now pretty well established that sugar and the inflammation it drives is a major cause of cardiovascular disease. And of course, pretty much everybody should know by now that sugar is a main driver of diabetes. And once again, metabolically, carbs in concentrated forms are sugar as far as your body is concerned. And then, of course, the last of the big three is cancer. And this has been known for over a century now. And it started with Otto Warburg's Warburg hypothesis of how most cancers use aerobic glycolysis of glucose to drive cell replication. And that's yet to be shot down. And so it's well known that sugar is a major driver of cancer. Now, it goes further than this. These are the big three, but there's things like arthritis, immune function, autoimmune function, allergies. It goes on and on and on. Mental things, dementia, Alzheimer's. That's now being thought of in various research circles as type 3 diabetes. So I can't begin to stress how important this is and want to remind you in a very healthy way that carbs equal sugar and that there's a real problem with this chronic consumption of a lot of carbohydrates, which your body sees metabolically simply as sugar. And this is where Vespa and OFM can help you get back to your native physiology and build that metabolic capacity to cut out that 1/3, half, or 2/3 of the overall sugar so that you can perform and be better less. And we even have a special offer here where for the price of shipping, you can get 4 sample pouches of Vespa to try. We're so confident in our products and our approach that for $20 for our shipping and handling, we'll send you 4 pouches to get you started. So step 1, start using Vespa. And once you've got that experience, you'll have the curiosity and the confidence to take step 2. And that's the confidence to get back to the native physiology that you have and tap into your limitless potential. So get started today and order your Vespa now.